So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Liz Benesky, and I'm from AmCham Abu Dhabi, and it is our pleasure to welcome you. We also wish to give a heartfelt warm welcome to our fellow GCC AmCham members who may be on the call today. As you know, all AmCham GCCs collaborate to bring you the best in programming, and I want to give a heartfelt Happy New Year welcome to you all, especially our friends at the Australian Business Group, the Canadian Business Council, and the Pakistani Business Council. I'm very happy to have everyone here with us today as our fantastic Legal Affairs Committee presents recent developments on the legal and business scene. It's a heck of a panel, and there's going to be a lot of questions, so please put your questions in the chat. They have a full packed agenda with 7 panelists, and from this event, you're going to see that more information will be delivered in future events. So if you're not an AmCham member, now's the time to join. This recording will be shared after the event. Without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you Leslie Bellis, who is one of our fantastic board members here at AmCham, and she is also serving on the Legal Affairs Committee, and she is a consultant for environmental programs at RTI International. Floor is yours, Leslie. Thanks.
Thank you, Liz. So I won't repeat Liz. We are here to talk about the changes that are being made by the UAE to attract and retain businesses in the UAE. It's been a remarkable year, and we expect these changes to facilitate continued economic growth and diversification in the UAE. As Liz said, we have 7 speakers, and each will speak for approximately 6 minutes. I don't mean to cut them off, but my job is to make sure we get through this agenda in 45 minutes so that we have some time for questions. As Liz said, use the chat function. We'll come back to it. We want you to know that this is by no means the end of the discussion on these changes. We view this as a first in a series of webinars, and we would like you to tell us which topics are of interest to you so that we can set up subsequent sessions for a deep dive. With that, I am thrilled to introduce our first speaker is Judge Oren Whiting. He's with the Abu Dhabi Judicial Department. We have been trying to get him involved for some time, and now he is able to speak to the public, so we're very thrilled to have him. He's a former presiding judge with the Cook County, Ohio, and he's been in Abu Dhabi for 18 months, and he will speak to us about the Abu Dhabi courts and general policies to promote investment in the business climate. So with that, Judge Whiting. Judge Whiting?
Sorry about that. I was on mute and speaking and didn't realize. But number one, thanks for that introduction. And it's a pleasure to join this morning. Since I've only got 6 minutes, I'm going to do my quick presentation as quickly as I possibly can. I'm speaking this morning from a judicial perspective about the recent measures taken by the government of Abu Dhabi to encourage investment and to generally improve the business climate here in the Emirate. Look, serving as a judge and as a consultant and judicial instructor for ADJD for the last 18 months, I have personally seen and have become more involved with several of the developments in the court. And I will focus my remarks on what the Abu Dhabi's main court as a government partner is doing to support the efforts to enhance business in this emirate. Sheikh Mansour, who Deputy Prime Minister and is the Minister of Presidential Affairs and the Chairman of the court, is an integral part of the effort to enhance the business sector through new and more flexible economic-based legislation. Numerous government departments, including the Abu Dhabi Department of Economic Development, have issued resolutions and decrees affecting the regulation and operation of economic activities in this emirate. These actions are specifically designed not only to promote foreign investment, but also what is sometimes forgotten is to stimulate Emirati entrepreneurship. Obviously, the most recent and important legislative activity are the amendments to the Commercial Companies Law, where the UAE government overhauled foreign ownership rules applicable to commercial companies. The decree introduced amendments to UAE Federal Law number 2 of 2015 on commercial companies, or the Commercial Companies Law. The foremost change removes the requirement for commercial companies to have a major UAE national shareholder or agent, which provides for full foreign ownership of onshore companies. Other changes include increasing the percentage of shareholders that companies wishing to become joint stock companies through IPOs from 30 to 70%. Stakeholders will be able to sue companies in the civil courts over any failure of duties that result in damages. And companies may approve capital increases through issuing bonds and converting them into shares. The judiciary, as a mechanism for the resolution of disputes, plays an important role in the strategy by applying the newly passed laws to the facts. The ADJD Undersecretary has launched several programs and is planning to introduce several initiatives to complement the country's efforts and to improve the quality of judicial services provided in accordance with the highest international standards. These include the implementation of remote litigation. Digital authentication is now integrated into various and other remote services provided by ADJD, including the use of video conferencing that eliminates the need for court users to actually appear in court in person at the ADJD headquarters. Obviously, the creation of a foreign experts chamber with American judges presiding has been implemented and is developing rapidly. The adoption of digital authentication procedures for notary public and authentication transactions now makes it possible to dispose of the traditionally manual process of signing, sticking, and sealing of documents. Users will receive their documents in digital forms and will no longer be sent via courier service. There's a launch of the digital money order system for the disbursements of amounts held in deposit. This innovation is likely to speed up bank transfers and expedite remittance of their dues to the court users in a way that's easy and simple. The court is establishing chambers specializing in money laundering and tax evasion under the framework of the department's strategy to give priority and to improve the litigation process to create a fair and just legal system. One thing that's also been implemented is the publication of judgments rendered by the courts of Abu Dhabi on its website as part of the efforts to raise legal awareness and to enhance the cognitive background amongst the community members and confirm the impartiality and transparency of the legal principles, as well as to enhance the Emirates' competitiveness in the rule of law index. The introduction
I'll
of
give you a minute warning.
Okay, great.
1 minute warning, if you don't
I'm
mind.
almost done. Here,
Okay, great.
these are things that are coming. The introduction of a bilingual court forms to include English, that's there. Adoption of English as a second language in a number of its commercial court procedures. Here are the measures that are being considered to promote the new laws. We will be educating the judges, providing online training in Arabic and English to help the judges understand and correctly apply the new business laws. There will be a formation of an office to provide legal guidance about the legislative changes. What is being seriously considered is an introduction of an Arabic English speaking chamber for commercial and personal status. And what's the ultimate goal is to have a bar course for expat lawyers, which will give the opportunity of non-Emirati lawyers to basically pass a bar exam for the right to appear and argue and represent the clients before court. And since my time is short, the court is really looking forward to reaching out and collaborating with international chambers of commerce from around the world, and is going to be very much aggressive in reaching out for that. That is about 0.2% of what I really want to say, but Leslie is giving me these looks, so I'm going to stop. But we will be back. Okay.
You will be back. We are going to be delighted to have you back. You can have a whole hour to yourself when you.
I think I'll need a week to give everything that's going on. So.
It'll be a brown bag, a weekly brown bag.
Exactly.
Thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll have many questions and subsequent follow-up. I'd like to introduce Dr. Kaiser, who's the Managing Director of Alliat Management Consulting. Dr. Kaiser has decades of accounting and consulting experience in the UAE. He's also a founding member of AmCham and has been a board member for many, many years. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kaiser to speak about some of the COVID and vaccine issues that have arisen. Dr. Kaiser? You may be on mute.
Thank you, Leslie, for a great introduction. Thank you so much. And good morning, everyone. And this is going to be a great event, which you are going to look is very knowledgeable for everyone. And the task which was given to me is very challenging of COVID-19, which bring the world to very small as a global. COVID-19, as you all know, started in December 31 in 2019 in Wuhan, China. And then in January 29, UAE have few cases. And from March 8, all UAE school and university were closed. You all know time passes now, it is 9 months. Now, the effort which the government has taken immediately, which is very commendable. They were having a national disinfection program and safe distancing rules announced. National screening center for COVID-19 are available for all Emirates. Test centers are also available across all Emirates to provide fast-paced tests for citizens and residents, drive-through COVID-19 test center across the UAE, free COVID-19 tests at the home of residents to boost effort to drive down infection. These measures were the reason to control the pandemic. And will give you the knowledge that this mass testing action resulted in controlling the pandemic. To update you, since yesterday, 22.4 million tests carried out since pandemic. It's enormous. And this was as per UAE report. Yesterday, 2,876 more coronavirus is growing. We have to be careful in record. And it took the tally to 230,578. The recovery reached to 206,114, which is 89%, which is very good result. So it's very, very serious on the account of this. And the government has announced the protocol for which to follow. And that's why we are fine here in Abu Dhabi. They have a which strictly applied to all the institutions and offices, especially the SOPs, which is social distancing, mask, gloves, hand washing, temperature check. These basic things should be followed and should be continued for all the time to come. This strict control also on the entry in Abu Dhabi is a big measure of spreading of COVID-19. We comment to the government on this, and they are relaxing, and hopefully it will be better after this vaccine. Pandemic challenge for the world, how to handle European chaos, US and India having the highest cases. All these were very alarming for business getting standstill, especially aviation, hospitality, tourism, production in standstill, transportation was not there, everything became very expensive. We all salute the frontline heroes who risked their life for saving other lives. We all will be remembering their services in these hard days. And I thank to the UAE government to honor all those frontline heroes to provide maximum facilities. This will continue in 2021. Still, it will follow, and we have to follow the SOP. We cannot relax. But the good news and commendable news is the research which is carried out, all these small time, very small time, I must say, to come up with a vaccine. Who started working for vaccine and all over the world with his hard work, able to have nearly 5 to 6 vaccines, not one. And in United Arab Emirates, we have already Sinopharm. There are 2 vaccines which has come in the UAE for use. The eligible individual against the COVID-19 infection, that's a Sinopharm, and other one is Pfizer Biotech. The UAE is offering these vaccines to its citizen and resident free of charge, which is very generosity for that, I must say. And on this is certainly 86% efficiency on Sinopharm and 99% is on Sinopharm conversion rate. So
Dr. Kaiser, we can't see your face with the paper. Do you mind? Thank you. That's okay. We just want to see you.
And same is the Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine, which is going in Dubai, and it's nearly 78,793 people have got it, and more than 1 million already done. The control SOP of pandemic, the vaccine will sure bring back the life. Now, this disruption has affected the business in United Arab Emirates, not only UAE, all over the world. As I said, the business went very standstill. Businesses, especially the hospitality, especially the aviation industry, which you have seen how many airlines are on the ground. The government has come up with program and with facilities in a huge way, which is very.
We have a 1-minute warning, okay?
Okay, sure. Thank you. Thank you very much. So that the government which has come up with a 100 billion comprehensive economic support, which is huge, and for the corporate customer, especially for COVID-19, this measure has brought the business in action, and which you see this business now working, especially bank and businesses, is because of these facilities. And the government promulgated Dubai government has nearly 15 facilities provided to the companies, and similarly, Abu Dhabi has come up of 15 facilities. So all these effects has made the business to important thing to control their revenue, to control their human resources, to maintain their cash flow, to maintain the functioning of the business in this pandemic environment. And this seems to be still having 2021. You know that there was major expo in 2020, which was extended to 2021. Now, inshallah, we'll have on 20. This is going to be a good year. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Perfect timing. I was just about to cut you off. Okay, our next speaker is Iftikhar Haq. He's a senior manager at Fragaman Worldwide. He is an, I don't want to say expert, but close to an expert on immigration. So we are thrilled to have him talk about the changes in visit and residence visas and employment measures. So with that, I turn it over to him.
Thank you, Leslie. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and wishing you a very, very happy 2021 to all of you. From an immigration standpoint, we have seen several changes over the past few months, and the authorities, they have introduced several announcements and changes over the past few months as well. So in fact, we have witnessed the quick thinking and flexibility of the authorities throughout the pandemic and their swift responses to the immigration needs and the requirements. So certainly these changes have been important and initiatives to provide the competencies in the market and as well as the business opportunities. And eventually this is going to build the nation's economy as well. So I will go through the key changes and updates which we have seen over the past few months. So I will start the latest update we have seen in the month of December, where the Dubai government authorities announced visit visa extension for those who had been in country and their visas were set to expire in late December. So the announcement was to automatically renew the visit visa for those who have been in country in late December till January 2026 without paying any government fees or adding any hassle to the visitors. So these kind of activities of the government that is showing, that is demonstrating the flexibility in terms of immigration requirements. Likewise, we have also seen the authorities, they have extended the deadline for the residence permit holders who have been out of country for more than 180 days and their visas are valid and they want to return to the UAE. So the initial deadline was 31st of December, which has been extended to 31st of March 2021. However, if the individual's residence permit was expired either before March or after the March 2020, and they haven't returned to the UAE, their visas have been canceled and they would need to apply for a new visa if they want to return to the UAE. In addition to this, we have also seen the changes in the ICA approval process, and which is absolutely in light of the COVID condition in the country and traveling location as well. So currently the Abu Dhabi government authorities, they have requested to have eligibility confirmation in order to travel to Abu Dhabi. But if the individual is traveling to Dubai, he would need to obtain an approval from the GDRFA authorities in order to travel to Dubai. In the last November as well, we have seen also the announcement from the Dubai government authorities, and they have introduced a freelancer license that will allow 48 types of business activities to be conducted in Abu Dhabi. So earlier, this permit was only available for the UAE nationals, but now that has been extended to the foreign nationals, regardless of them being in country or out of the country. This was quite an interesting announcement, which has catch the eyes of the visitors and the residents in the UAE. So what is the eligibility criteria to obtain this freelancer license? So in principle, there are two requirements. So individual must present academic qualification or an experience certificate to validate his expertise in that particular industry or particular business. The second requirement is if individual is in country on a residence visa and he is sponsored by any organization in the UAE, he would need to obtain an NOC letter from the existing sponsor if they wish to obtain a license for a similar activity they are hired for. So these are two major requirements to apply for this license. From the process wise, the authorities have also simplified this process, and individual can just apply through the Abu Dhabi Business Center website with proof of expertise and documentary requirements. And it will cost only 500 to 1,000 dirhams and 150 to 250 US dollars. And the permit will be issued for 2 years. This will also allow individual to obtain a residence permit under this license and for accompanying dependents as well. The permit will allow to conduct business activities within the Abu Dhabi jurisdiction without having him an office, physical office space in Abu Dhabi to conduct the business activities. The similar announcement we have seen from the Ras Al Khaimah Free Zone authorities, which is also quite interesting and attractive for investors, where the individuals can invest nearly 110,000 US dollars and invest in property and get a property, at least one studio flat or one bedroom or more. This
Can
will
I
allow
give you a 1 minute? I'm sorry, 1 minute warning, please.
This will allow an individual to obtain a two residence permit investor visas, and this will also allow to sponsor dependents as well. And the interesting thing is that the cost will be observed by the free zone authorities up to 12 years. The license will allow to conduct business activities within the free zone, and all the cost of the residence permit renewal as well as the license renewal will be observed by the government authorities. The similar announcement we have seen from the remote worker program in Dubai, which will allow individuals to be working remotely if they wish to continue working for the sponsoring entity in overseas from Dubai. So So these are the announcements we have seen over the past few months that is really interesting to see in coming days, and we are expecting more in coming days. As we see in 2021, we can expect the government to drive more digitization of its program and simplify the immigration process. So we'll continue monitoring the updates and changes in coming days, and we will inform you and update you with changes and news. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker, for the past 12 years, Yassin has been a senior finance advisor to the Abu Dhabi Department of Finance and Administrative Services. He's also a member of the Legal Affairs Committee, a very active one. And so I will turn it over to him to discuss the changes in social laws.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Leslie. Good morning, everyone. We'll talk briefly about some of the changes on the penal code front. The idea, I think, from listening to the panelists and keeping up with the news on the legal environment in the UAE, it appears as if laws and regulations are sort of catching up with the tremendous pace of economic development and as well as social development, frankly, among whether it is the local population or the expat communities, just trying to sort of keep up with what has transpired in this country in terms of the growth over the past 50 years or so. The laws and some of the changes that I would like to go over, basically it's about the supremacy of the law, some aspects of it about the protection of rights of women, and also to make sure that the country continues to be an attractive destination from a social and economic front. So on the side of, in terms of alcohol offenses, I don't know if you remember the days when you actually, as an expat, as a non-Muslim expat, you actually had to obtain a license to purchase alcohol and to go to the designated stores for that. That is no longer, of course, the case. The alcohol consumption, it is allowed to sell it or consume it in authorized designated places. Each emirate will have the authority to issue any regulatory rules regarding this matter. The only punishment in terms of the laws in the 2020 changes is restricted to serving or selling alcohol to folks who are under 21 years of age. And that's an age we're quite familiar with coming from the United States. So that's the only thing that's there in terms of prison and or fines for folks who are under 21 from serving or selling it. The other aspect of the other category of penal code changes had to do with the sex offenses. So the law does now, there is no mention of any sort of consensual sex among adults will not be punished by law as per the new changes. The only elements where the law sort of states forcefully punishments is for actually death penalty for rape and sex with minors who are under 14 or who are mentally challenged or cannot legally of mental capacity to give consent. Another aspect of it is in terms of the financial fines for public decency. The first offense of that only carries now financial fines, but no prison term. Sexual harassment, the law, again, in terms of the protection of rights of women, sexual harassment is now punishable by fines and or prison term, which is a tremendous advancement. One element that talks to the supremacy of the law in the UAE, and this is actually a departure. Just like the departure of alcohol consumption, it sort of moves away from a religious mandate, for example, for Muslims or someone like me not to consume alcohol in the country where now it is allowed. The honor crimes, and I'm sure you might have heard about it. It's a practice where it's an ugly, vicious practice where if a female relative is allegedly accused of a relationship of sexual nature, male relatives might assault her or, God forbid, cause her further harm. And the legal codes in various countries in the Middle East actually provide leniency or lesser punishment for folks who are supposedly convicted of what's called honor crimes, because the male relatives are ought to protect the honor of the family. There is no leniency at all due to the new changes. A crime is a crime, whether it is committed in the name of honor or any other reason. And this is also further protection for women's rights in this country. One other aspect, I don't know if I'm ought to cover this, is the notion of attempted suicide. Again, suicide is sort of frowned upon in terms of the Islamic faith, and folks who are actually attempt or are successful at suicide, the scriptures call for them not to even enter heaven. The legal code in the UAE is based on Sharia law. So the person who has actually used to attempt suicide, there were provisions for him or her to be punished. The new law provides the courts with discretion to actually, rather than punish the person who might have problems to actually attempt suicide, to commit the person to a treatment institution rather than punish them. So again, we see sort of the past few years where there's movement toward more tolerance, more acceptance, departure from religious basis of laws toward a more secular basis. And we see that reflected in the new changes that we have that are encoded now in the 2020 Penal Code changes.
So we're under a minute. Are you good?
I'm good. That's all I have. Thank you.
Mumtaz. Okay, fabulous. Thank you. Our next speaker, Nasser Al-Othaiba, is the managing partner at Global Advocacy's Abu Dhabi's office. He is a former AmCham board member and a very active member of the Legal Affairs Committee. I will turn it over to him to talk about the personal and family law changes that are occurring right now. Nasser, thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Assalamu alaikum, friends and colleagues, and today's webinar. As previously, a few minutes ago, my colleagues here mentioned, there were so many changes in 2020 to so many laws. What I'm going to touch on today is the divorce and matrimonial relationship between people. There were changes to these laws, not only in the family law, also in the civil transaction law, because civil transaction relates to wills and considered it as, a contract. For a long time, this was very controversial topics. So people who are non-Muslims and non-local here from different countries, they are confused with how does the law in UAE deal with their marriage or their wills. So the changes now has referred to the law of the country where the marriage has took place in deciding the conditions of this law, whether it is valid or not. So it's not the UAE law that regulates a marriage. It's the country that the marriage has taken place in, no matter what was the nationality of the people or where they are staying. This law also applies on the related matters like financial matters related to marriage or custody matters. It also applies on divorce and separation. So UAE law is not applied on people who are not, part of this system or not part of Sharia, non-Muslims and non-UAE citizens. The other part is that wills used to be very difficult here because the law didn't decide how to deal with wills locally. So in recent developments, last few years, courts started looking at the law of the citizenship of the person himself. So if an English person put a will, they will ask for the English law. If American, they will ask what is the situation in the American law. Now the changes in the civil transaction law said the same thing, that the law of the country of the deceased is applied on his estate. If he put a will, then the law that is chosen by this will be applied. So if he put a will and choose to apply US law, so he specified the law here, then that law will be applied on his will. If that was not applied, then they will go back to his citizenship and the law of his country. An exception from that is the if among the state there were property that are located in UAE, so on this property, the UAE law will be applied. It's because of the nature of the property. So it has different laws that regulate it. I think by this I'm done. I don't want to take more time. We're running out of time here, but there I'm looking forward for more events to explain more about these changes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nasser. I appreciate it. Our next speaker, we're at 6 of 7, is John McGowan, who has worked in Abu Dhabi in the UAE for more than 20 years. He is of Council Global Advocacy. He is also, I believe, a founding member of AmCham and a long-term board member, as well as very co-chair of the Legal Affairs Committee. So I will turn it over to him to speak about the UAE companies laws and the changes in the bankruptcy laws as well. John? John, I think you're on mute because I can't hear you. John?
Yes. Thank you, Leslie. Thanks. Yes, I was on mute. And anyway, I like to, Judge Whiting did touch on some of the changes in the foreign ownership laws in the UAE, and they're very important. I want to sort of drill a little deeper on some of the points, because there were a lot of changes to the companies law. It's probably the biggest changes to the companies law in about 5 years or so. There were over 50 amendments, and there were 3 new provisions added. As the judge said, the big highlight was the change in the 51% rule. And for those that don't know, for the longest time, the UAE law had required all limited liability companies to be owned by at least 51% UAE nationals. And so that now has been repealed. The requirement for a local sponsor, which we're all familiar with, that has been repealed. Again, that's one of the hallmarks for many, many years. And by the way, those laws are not, we don't say goodbye to those laws easily. They help build an amazing economy here, but times have changed. And the UAE, as usual, is moving with the times. The judge also mentioned the requirement of the majority of board of directors for public and private joint stock companies. The former rule was they had to be a majority UAE nationals. again, that requirement is gone. So essentially, what is happening now, the default rule, if you will, is that the UAE is open for business onshore to 100% foreign ownership. There's one important exception, and this is something that we're going to hear a lot about, I'm sure, in 2021, and that is if the general rule is you can have 100% foreign ownership, but if the activities involve a strategic impact to the UAE, so for example, defense or telecommunications, something of that nature, then that is not, there may be a requirement for UAE national participation. That participation will be in the form of capital or maybe management. It'll be decided, and how is it going to be decided? Because we all remember the short-lived foreign direct investment law, which, by the way, has been abrogated by this new law. There's no more foreign direct investment law. That's gone. And this law is taking over. This law establishes a committee, okay? And that committee is going to be formed of 2 members of DED, Department of Economic Development, from each of the Emirates. And it'll be that committee that decides how the licensing is going to work. You know, what constitutes an activity that has strategic impact. And those activities that are in that category, there will be some sort of UAE national participation. Could be 10%, 20%, could be managerial roles or a percentage of personnel. We'll see how it plays out. But that's a really big task, and it's an important one, and it's going to have dramatic change and impact. And again, consistent with best practices. What will be interesting is what we all know those areas that are clearly strategic impact. Again, I mentioned a couple of them. You know, well, what about high tech? What about you know, what about insurance and, you know, things that may be or financial services. So these activities, it'll be very interesting to see how the committee handles it.
John, you have a John, 1 minute warning.
Oh, ouch. Wow.
Sorry.
Okay. And anyway, so that's very, very important. We'll be watching that committee to see how they do. I'm sure they're going to do great, but business is open in the Emirate. And just real quick on the bankruptcy law, major change in 2020. The bankruptcy law now, to accommodate the COVID-19 situation, has established an economic financial crisis set of amendments. And what those amendments do, they give debtors better protection. And there's some really good provisions in there. One I particularly like, and we're going to be fencing it with one of our clients who just called us last week. But it affords an opportunity to for the debtor to cut a deal within 40 days if he or she can, or the company can. But you know, the other important thing to remember about bankruptcy is, as a law firm, we can tell you we haven't seen a lot of bankruptcy cases. We've had a few. There's probably, as far as I know, less than 24 in Abu Dhabi since, you know, over the period the bankruptcy law has been in effect. It's got a lot of problems, but it's good fodder for negotiation. And stay tuned there as well, because you're going to see changes. Sorry, Leslie.
Thank you.
Whatever time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, last but certainly not least is Charles Laubach, who's been practicing in the UAE since 1986. So exceedingly knowledgeable about the law and local circumstances. He's a partner at Alfredi and Angel. He advises on general corporate matters, contracts, government paperwork. I believe he is also a founding AmCham board member, as well as long-term serving board member and chair of the Legal Affairs Committee. He's the person that makes sure we bring all these events to you. So I will turn it over to him to discuss ultimate beneficial owners and economic substance regulations. Charles, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Leslie. Sound okay? Okay.
Yes.
I'll be pretty brief about this. We've seen the big picture from the other members of the panel, which I think is an important sort of background, but I'm going to give you a couple of narrow bore peeks into what's happening in the regulatory scene. The UAE's compliance officials, if you're a compliance officer in your company, you're probably a lot busier now than you were a couple of years ago, because the UAE is becoming more and more tightly regulated. There are more requirements that you make disclosures that were not required before. There are penalties if you fail to do this. And all of this is designed to enhance the status of the UAE as a place to do business, to enhance transparency, and to just basically enhance good business practices. And that's kind of the background. The charge really was led by the anti-money laundering regulations, which in the UAE go back to about really 1980, but they've really begun to develop teeth. And teeth outside just the banking sector, but generally applicable requirements now exist throughout the UAE. I'm going to send you around a note on this later on, but the major statute now is Federal Decree Law 20 of 1918 and a Cabinet Resolution 74 of 2020, just this year, that applies the requirements to have an AML policy in place pretty much throughout the UAE for everyone who's a financial institution, everyone who is instead a designated non-financial business or profession. That's pretty much everyone here probably. You're supposed to have anti-money laundering compliance guidelines internally. You're supposed to train your personnel. You're supposed to report suspicious transactions. When directed to do so, you're supposed to seize suspected funds. You've got to basically be part of the enforcement mechanism for the AML compliance regulations here in the UAE. Flowing from AML compliance are a series of rules now on ultimate beneficial owners, UBOs they're called, or true owners of companies. There is a Cabinet Resolution number 10 of 2019 and also number 58 of 2020 that implement the UBO regulations. And what is basically required is that, again, pretty much everyone out there is supposed to have a register, an internal register of your company, of your business, of who the shareholders or partners are, and a separate one of who the ultimate beneficial owners are. If there are people that are not shareholders, but are ultimate owners of the company, or if you have trust arrangements or side agreements or voting arrangements or something like that, those persons who have power, de facto power over the company, are going to be deemed as ultimate beneficial owners. And you should have a register of those in your company, in your business. And depending on where you're operating, you might be required to make disclosures too. There were a set of UBO requirements introduced in October with a compliance deadline of October 27, 2020. That has been extended because of COVID, but the current guidelines, I think, require compliance by the end of this month, end of January. All of that's been driven by the Financial Action Task Force, which has done a series of bilateral reviews with the UAE. The most recent mutual evaluation report was released in April of 2020. If you want to just Google search the mutual evaluation report, FATF UAE for 2020, take a look at it. It's 600 pages of bedtime reading. It'll give you an idea of how the international financial community views the UAE, and also more importantly, what the UAE is trying to do to become a more and more, eventually to achieve FATF membership. Related to all this, but with a different set of motivating factors, really is the requirement now to comply with economic substance regulations. The regulations were promulgated by a cabinet resolution last year. And again, you're supposed to make a notification to the regulator within 6 months of the end of your financial year of economic substance compliance, and then actually file a report within 12 months of the end of your financial year. These are required of any business that conducts a relevant activity. And relevant activities, there are, let's see if I can get them out quickly. There are 9 of them: banking, insurance, investment fund, lease finances, headquarters, shipping, holding company, intellectual property, and distribution and service centers. So if you fall into one of those regulated activities, you are required to comply with the economic substance regulations. The deadlines for 2019 have likewise been extended because of COVID until the end of January 2021. But at that time, you're supposed to comply with both the notification and the filing requirement under ESRs. And this, again, you might recall that a couple of years ago, the UAE was blacklisted by the European Union for having a lack of transparency in financial dealings and corporate dealings. This was designed to get the UAE off of that blacklist. It succeeded, but we've all got one more compliance filing as a result of that. So Leslie, that's basically it. Anti-money laundering, UBO, ESR. It's here, it's real, and all you compliance people out there, I'm one of them. One more job to do with sanctions if you don't do it. So that's all I've got to say for now. Thanks.
Thank you, all of you, for wonderful, concise presentations. We have outstanding questions from several people. I will try to summarize them because of time. Otherwise, I would let them ask them themselves. Rana wrote, and I guess this is directed to Dr. Kaiser, about directive number 16 of 2020 regarding mandatory vaccines. And the question is, does the directive mandate vaccination for contractors working or accessing government facilities? And if so, what is the consequence if the consultant cannot or does not get the vaccine? Dr. Kaiser, you're on mute. I'm sorry.
This law states for any institution, any government institution, if you go to immigration, you have to have PCR test or you are vaccinated. Otherwise, you are not allowed there. This is right from the inception, and this is for their own reason. They are implemented this. So this is mandatory. It is a mandatory.
So are you saying that you could instead just get PCR tests and not get the vaccine? Is that acceptable?
Yeah, you can go there with PCR test with some 24-hour, 48 hours, within 48 hours of that time. Otherwise, vaccine is recently started. So okay. Now the vaccine is also become the requirement, but it's still PCR test. You can visit within that period of time of 48 hours or 72 hours time.
So are you saying that
yeah,
if you don't want to get a vaccine or you're waiting for Pfizer, whatever your reasons are, can a contractor just get a PCR test every 2 days to be able to continue working in a government facility? Is that right?
That's their requirement.
Okay.
That's their requirement.
Rana, do you have any follow-up to that? Does that answer your question?
Well, actually, hello, everyone. Leslie, the directive I'm referring to has been issued the very last day of last year, and it says a little bit slightly different than what we've been doing so far. It allows for the time being every 14 days the PCR test, but the second bullet point of the directive 16 for the year 2020 it is generally speaking, that it's a condition for any existing or new contracts with the government to have the contractors or consultants staff vaccinated. And this is very, very new, 10 days old directive, which we are not fully aware of what the implications are. And it is conflicting by the nature of the 2 bullet points included in that directive. So
I will further comment on that. The reason of this thing, the reason is this, because that was the PCR test was the old one. After the vaccine started it from which is recently, so they implemented it that one, and they want to do everyone should have been vaccinated is more better than to have, like, even in the schools, they have 14 days requirement or 10 days requirement. So they are all getting replaced with the vaccine. So, you know, they have a target of this, and that is what they changed recently.
My question was, from a personal privacy perspective, can one force an individual to take a vaccine at any point in time?
Yeah, you can take it.
Could I add one point? I'm sorry, Dr. Kaiser. This is Yassine. The UAE Armed Forces, there was no choice. And this happened, actually, they completed their vaccination program by the end of the summer, the beginning of the fall. Abu Dhabi Police, it was sort of recommended. People were encouraged to participate in the trials and then the vaccination program later in the fall. Now it's mandatory. We're talking mandatory for any police officer, for any kind of transaction. They could not proceed with any transaction in terms of promotion or any movement or anything within police unless they are vaccinated. So the trend, just to tell you, Rana, where we're heading, the trend is where vaccination is not going to become a choice. I think there is a movement toward making sure that it's mandatory. I know there are issues with personal liberty and privacy, especially for folks who've come from the western part of the world.
Yes,
but this is what we're heading.
Thanks for that. Just a quick question for the group, in particular you and Dr. Kaiser, and that is, as an alternative, I agree that's the trend, clearly, is mandatory vaccine, but is it possible to have a middle ground for some people? For example, requiring anyone who doesn't want to get the vaccine to be tested, every 2 weeks, for example. If you don't want the vaccine, you must get tested twice a month, for example, or some other compromise. Do you see that happening?
I'm not really sure. I know that I've completed my vaccination around the National Day weekend, and now I'm required as a government of Abu Dhabi employee to be tested twice monthly, and this is for someone who has been vaccinated.
Oh,
so
really?
I'm not sure
Wow.
if your suggestion is going to actually materialize. I see it sort of the trend is that they're going to make it quite difficult for folks not to choose. Now there is a lot of public awareness campaign to encourage people to do it, but we're heading with it in the direction where it's going to be mandatory, I believe.
Are they going to give options for which vaccine you can get, Pfizer versus Sinopharm versus, or are we all
wants Pfizer?
Well, UAE is for, Abu Dhabi is for Sinopharm, and they are having a project here also. And Dubai will have they're having Pfizer. So if I don't know if you can go to Dubai and get it Pfizer there. That's the point.
No. Well, I believe Abu Dhabi is going to try to get Pfizer here as
hopefully.
well.
So
no, yeah, I mean, they're working on it, is my understanding. So let me go on to the next questions, because I know we have several. For Iftikhar, somebody asked, is there any been changes to the requirements to have a lease agreement where the number of visas is linked to office space? Right now that we have remote working, are there changes afoot to that?
We haven't received any written guidance from the authorities in terms of changing the requirement. However, in practice, we have seen the acceptance of remote working model. where the companies, they have allowed 50% approximately people to be working from home, and the authorities, they consider when they issue the quota to the companies, as well as other factors. They also contribute to obtain additional quotas, such as how the companies, they are maintaining their WPS, other corporate documents, as well as the business contract with the companies and business model. So based on all these, the authorities, they issue additional quotas to the companies. And we have seen the flexibility of the authorities in terms of in the current environment.
Yeah, I mean, it's an excellent question. Maybe that's something the Legal Affairs Committee can work on in terms of putting together guidelines in general about requirements that have changed as a result of COVID, and seeking or, you know, alerting the government to some of the need for changes to make it consistent with practice. I don't know what people think about that. I have another question for Yassine, which he did answer on the chat, but everybody should hear. What is the obligation for employers to report sexual harassment within the office? Should you update policies to reflect the changes in the new law? Yassine, I'll ask you to answer that.
Sure.
You've answered
Sure,
it on
sure.
chat, but answer it for everybody to benefit.
Sure, this was from Abir, I believe. Yes, the second part is that, you know, in terms of better protection for the company itself and for everyone in the company, it's advisable to update internal policy to sort of kind of stress upon the importance of respectful, harassment-free work environment. The clauses do not call for a reporting mechanism for employers to actually report sexual harassment, but just in terms of an employer, stress upon each employer to update their internal, just to make sure that folks are aware that whatever someone is doing it's illegal, not just by company policy, but also legally in the country.
Okay, and Nasser, Raya has a question, which is, does the law apply to Muslim expats who are married outside the UAE but live inside the UAE?
Well, the law of the country where the marriage took place, this is what the law says. So even if they were UAE citizens who got married in France, French law will be applied here.
Okay.
This is from the face of it, from reading the law. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Raya. Does that answer your question? I hope so. Uzma asks Yassine, can a UK citizen who is a Muslim have a will?
Answer my
I'm
question.
sorry?
Sorry, it does answer my question. Thank you very much. It's clear.
Okay, sure. And Uzma asks Yassine, can a UK citizen who is a Muslim have a will drafted in accordance with UK law?
I'll defer to my colleague Nasser on this matter.
Okay. Nasser?
Can you repeat the question, Leslie, please?
Sure. Can a UK citizen who is a Muslim have a will drafted in the UAE that is in accordance with UK laws? So
yes.
There are UK, okay.
Yes, and that happened before, before even the law has changed.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have another question no, for Charles, I think. Okay. Charles, is there any, and it's from Jotun, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Is there any clarity on where the shareholder UBO registers need to be filed with DED? And do you need to file physical copies, or is there online filing?
Sure, I answered Jotun on in the chat box, but the obligation that the regulations impose are to create and maintain a UBO register. It's not all of the regulators are requiring that it be filed, that it be disclosed, but some are. And so the question is, as and when the Abu Dhabi Department of Economic Development requires that you file the UBO register, or make a UBO filing with them, you do it. I think it's going to be online. The one in Dubai is online. The DIFC is online. Everything's online nowadays. So I expect it will be, but it's going to be when the regulator requests the filing to be made, that's when you file it. But the requirement is to have one and make sure that it is accurate. And you make the filing when the regulator requires the filing to be made.
Okay, and I have one last question for John, which is, can companies take immediate advantage of the repeal of the FDI law, or do we need to wait until the committee decides what's a strategic, I think they call it a strategic sector?
Yeah,
What's the
strategic
timing look like
impact,
on
yeah.
that?
Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
great
that's it.
question. And well, you know, FDI is as I said, abrogated. So those sort of activities are out the window, you know, that are cited there. And at the moment, we're waiting, you know. Now, what's going to be interesting is, you know, as we're waiting, do people go ahead and start forming companies starting January 2nd, right, last week,
Right.
based on, let's say you want to start a construction company, right? That's unlikely, you know, to be considered a strategic impact. You know, of course, it depends on the project, but you know, it would seem to me that because because the activity is not strategic impact, it should be okay. But I have one caveat there, and that is there is an extension until the end of March. Depends on when the start date is for the official gazette. Actually, it's an instance, and I'll have to show Nasser it, but the date on the official gazette when you read it says March 30th, excuse me, September 30th, but it was actually promulgated or released to the public at the end of November. So there's a 60-day window there. You know, what is the start date? When does the 6 months start ticking? But anyway, if you assume that it's September 30th, then on April 1st, all of the requirements for 51%, all the requirements for local sponsors, they're done. You know, and that's the other thing that we have to look at with our clients. There needs to be negotiation done with a lot of these companies. You know, if you have a 51% owner who's going to be walking away, that they need to be compensated, or you keep them on board. So there's going to be a lot of issues, and I suspect the lawyers are going to be busy on this one, and also the MOAs are going to have to be amended as well.
Charles, do you want to read your message to everybody, or do you want me to do it?
Yeah, well, you can, yeah, it's just, I'm repeating what John said, you know, just because 51% local ownership is no longer required doesn't mean it's a total free-for-all. An existing company with a sponsor or a 51% partner has got a valid contract in effect. Yeah. And you can't just walk away from the contract. If the contract can be terminated, you must do so in accordance with the contract's own terms. And then you've got to amend the licenses and go through the process for that. So you can't just say, you know, khalas, I'm gone. You've got to negotiate an exit and do it in the manner the contract requires. So, yeah, like John said, it's not, you're not, the law is fine for new companies coming to the market, but for ones that are already here, you've got a partner or a sponsor already that you've got to deal with.
Okay, well,
if I may add one point to Charles, please, Leslie. So there is an ownership in so many companies, and lots of people now are asking whether they can, you know, negotiate this with the 51% owner, or they can go to the court and ask the court to, kick him out. This is an ownership. Ownership cannot be taken without his consent. So businesses has to bear in mind that if they have a local sponsor or a 51 shareholder, they have to negotiate with him. They have to, have his consent that he will exit the company or leave this 51%.
Yes.
Thank you. So do we have any other questions before we adjourn and thank these fabulous panelists and the participants for outstanding questions? Any more questions from people? All right. Well, I just want to thank Liz and Shuhat and Len Izeni for setting this up, as always, and Charles for bringing the LAC fabulous webinars. So thanks, and thanks to our wonderful 7 panelists who engaged in very quick, succinct descriptions of what's going on. Please respond to I think we're going to send Liz a follow-up survey to tell us which of these topics or any others you would like a deep dive, so that we can continue to bring you helpful webinars as we move forward into 2021. Is there anything else?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Liz,
Thank
for
you,
doing
Leslie.
great job.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Great
Take
job.
care.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Joining us,
Bye.
AmCham. Y'all have a blessed day. Take care now.
Good. Bye.
Thank you. Have
Thank
a
you,
great
Full
year.
Affairs. Good job.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Recording
Sarah.
end.
Thanks, Sarah.